Hello, everyone, and welcome to a special live stream here. This is a rather interesting thing that happened. So we're live on both Facebook and we're also live on YouTube. This is something that I didn't even know could happen. So here we are again. Last time we were talking about an eagle nest all the way in Latvia, and before that we were talking about the white rock nest and the crows, and here we are again. And this is actually something that happened a few months ago, and we're going to the east coast this time of the United States, to Maine. And it seems that that eagles and loons have disputes, and this one seemed to have had a tragic end for the eagle, which is rather surprising. I had no idea this could even happen. And because this is seems to be such a rare event, the post-mortem or the forensic showed that it was indeed very likely to be a loon, or probably the mother loon, that was protecting the chick from a bald eagle, and seemed to have got a shot right to the heart, which probably instantaneously killed the eagle, which was then found floating with its head into the water. Rather incredible, because usually we expect eagles to die from lead poisoning or other things, right? Or maybe it's a fish hook, or well, lead poisoning is very common, or roadkills, right? But this was really unusual. So it is so unusual that I'm very lucky that I have actually been managing to connect with Professor David Bird. His name is really appropriate with the subject. He is an Emeritus Professor from the famous McGill University in Canada. And he's going to join us to discuss this topic. So very nice to see you. Before I go, I'm just going to quickly greet everyone here on YouTube, and I can see MacLady is there, Sherry, Orenium, Susan North, and so on. And I'm also looking now, let me quickly just make sure I have everyone here on Facebook. Just hang on, I need to see your comments. Facebook always makes it, one second, I just have to find your comments somewhere, so just bear with me, and then I will hand over to Professor Bird. I need to find your comments. Let me see where they are so I can see that. That's always a little bit difficult. Okay, now I need to. Okay, now I see your comments. Excellent. So I see also Tammy, James, Jenny, HS, Deborah, Tina, Alicia. Thank you, Jane. Tim is there again. Carol, Janelle, thank you for all joining. Wonderful to have you. It seems to be all working, the technology. So I'm going to jump straight into it now. And I'm going to call Professor Bird in. 1 second. Hello, David. How are you doing?
How you doing, Christian? It's always a pleasure to talk to you.
Well, David, the last time you and I were having a discussion was actually way back in 2017, when we were doing this incredible documentary on the hawklet in the Sydney nest, and it so happens that you lived very close to the Sydney nest. That became such a popular documentary that has over 620,000 views by now. So I mean, you contributed a lot to the documentary, so it's very nice to have you back today.
Thank you.
And thank you for taking the time. So just to jump in very quickly, so please give us a brief introduction about yourself, and then we'll jump right into the topic of what actually happened here. Thank you.
Okay, well, I mean, I was a professor of biology. I studied as an Emeritus Professor at McGill University in Montreal for 35 years. I did my master's and PhD there, and I've studied birds of prey all of my life, and I've had grad students even studied bald eagles as well, not loons, but I taught ornithology for 35 years, and I know a fair bit about it. And this story interested me as well. A lot of people are sending it to me, asking my thoughts on it.
Okay, very good. I'm going to blend myself in now. So, David, let's get straight to the point. Tell us something about the incident here. I just summarized it. Is this a fluke? Is this very common? What are your thoughts on this?
Well, it's not a surprise that a bald eagle and a loon would have a battle with each other. That's quite a common thing, because bald eagles are known to prey upon loon chicks, and probably even occasionally take the odd adult loon as well. What's a bit unusual about this one here is that the outcome is a little bit different. In this case, the loon took out the eagle. Now, if it was been just a young eagle, like a sort of a fledgling eagle with not much experience, that would be not so much of a surprise, I suppose. But the fact that this was an adult bald eagle and and a loon that only has against an eagle only has one weapon, and that's its bill, is a bit surprising. But my gut feeling is I think this loon kind of got in a lucky punch, if I can use that expression. I don't think that if you had 100 such encounters, that they would all turn out with the loon winning. I think in most cases the loon would lose, but in this case, this guy came out on top.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I, by the way, have a live stream here. So if you Google for a loon camera, so that's also from the East Coast. That is a live stream from a loon, and it
Right.
seems to have quite a ferocious bill there, right?
Yes. Yeah. Well, the bald eagle's got two weapons on its body. It's got, of course, its strong toes with those huge talons on them, which it commonly uses to grab things or whatever. It also uses its beak a fair bit. I've had captive bald eagles at my raptor center many years ago at McGill University. I've had them on my gloved hand, and I always had to hold the bald eagles away from my face because they're known to use their beaks, and sometimes they reach over and take a chunk out of your face, maybe even your eye. Whereas a golden eagle would be less likely to use its bill and more likely just to use its feet. But bald eagles, they for years I've always teased the Americans that they chose a symbolic bird that's pretty much that steals prey from ospreys and also eats a lot of dead things, carrion and so on. And of course, you and I have both seen bald eagles at the Vancouver landfill site wading through the garbage with the gulls and so on, taking garbage bags full of refuse to their nests with human food and so on in them. And so I was getting kind of a very dim impression of that. This is not a majestic bird, a lot of people think. But more recently, with bald eagles coming back in such great numbers because of the fact that DDT is being banned now, no more thin eggshells, and also we're not killing them for bounties and so on like they used to do in Alaska, where thousands upon thousands of bald eagles were killed for a few dollars for their feet. Bald eagles are coming back big time on both coasts and even a lot of the lakes in between. And I think that they are becoming very opportunistic in where they find food. I've heard accounts from bird of prey friends of mine of watching bald eagles flying down Canada geese as well as sandhill cranes in the air. The bald eagles are very powerful flyers, and they just simply harass these birds and keep flying after them until the geese or the cranes land on the ground, and the bald eagle comes down with their feet and finishes them off for food. And bald eagles commonly go after common loons as well, but mostly they go after the young ones. Common loons will have maybe one or two chicks, and the bald eagles will come down, and then it's up to the mother loon to try and defend their chicks. On occasion, I'm sure that if a bald eagle caught a loon unawares, maybe it just came up to the surface after catching a fish, and the bald eagle happened to get lucky and was right there and nailed it in the head, that common loon would die. But in a straight-out fight between a loon that sees the eagle there and the eagle itself, then it's almost anyone's guess who might come out on top. And in this particular case, the loon came out on top.
Right, and let's, I'm seeing some comments here. David, maybe you can explain a little bit, what are the differences actually between a loon and a duck? Because many are mistaken a loon for a duck.
Well, the loon's in a family all of its own. The Gavidae and the ducks are in another taxonomic group as well. And ducks are smaller than loons, and there are some ducks that dive like loons do for fish and mussels like loons do.
Mm-hmm.
But the ducks have more of a spatulate, flat type bill for getting food, whereas the loon has that long, powerful bill. I don't know if anyone studied loons under the water that much to know exactly how they might grab their fish. You'd need an underwater camera. You'd have to be Johnny on the spot. I've often sort of mused about the idea of using an underwater drone. I've even looked into it and have it, track a loon under the water. But the underwater drones are so expensive. I haven't been able to find a company that would want to do that sort of thing. But I'm fairly certain that the loons are using their beaks to grasp fish under the water as opposed to spearing it. I don't think we've seen many cases of a loon coming up from the underneath the water with its bill actually piercing right through a fish. That could get quite dangerous if it's stuck in there. But I think more likely they use their bills to grasp the fish under the water, and then they'll use sensory endings in their beaks and so on to position the fish just right to swallow it whole.
Isn't it so
But loons
interesting?
are also
Uh-huh.
known to prey on ducklings. So sometimes if a mother duck's out there with a bunch of ducklings, a loon will come up underneath and just simply come up just like a pike or a muskie might do to a loon chick and grab it from below.
Okay, that brings me straight here to a question here from Bart Madness on YouTube. What do loons eat?
Well, they're mostly pretty much fish eaters, but they're like most animals. They're opportunistic, and if they saw an opportunity to grab some ducklings or whatever, then that's meat to them as well. But by and large, they eat almost solely fish under the water of all sizes. And there's a lot of debate about whether they're eating a lot of game fish like trout or versus coarse species, which fishermen don't care about. In other words, there's a bit of a conflict that often goes on between fishermen and loons.
Right, and it is interesting that loons have solid bones. They don't have hollow
Yeah.
bones. Like penguins, right?
Well, there's a good reason for that, is because loons basically spend all of their time on the water and diving down below for fish. I mean, that's how they get their food. They've got to go under the water. So having a hollow bone wouldn't make much sense for a bird that wants to be heavy and go underneath the water. Now they pay a price for those
Yes.
those solid bones, and also the fact that their legs and feet, are not underneath their bodies like in a duck, for example. They're actually at the back, like a propeller. And so when a loon is on the ground, which they seldom are in a terrestrial situation, all of their nests are usually built right on the edge of the water. They can barely walk on land. They fall forward because their legs are so far back and their heavy bones push them forward, because they are built to float on top of the water, to dive into the water, and also to fly as well, because they are long distance migrators. And so they have very powerful wings and they can fly good distances. But it takes them a while to take off the water because of those heavy bones.
Okay, very good. Jane Strumpf is asking, how big can a loon get?
Well, I don't know the exact weight or size or whatever, but I suspect if a loon was out of the water, it might be standing maybe a couple of feet high, depending on whether it's bowing its head or whatever. But I don't know what their weight would be off the top of my head.
Yeah, I just read somewhere, if I remember correctly, they can actually become as heavy as a bald eagle. The very big loons can, which because
Yeah,
they're
I
solid.
would.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think. I've actually held loons in my
Mhm.
hand. I was up north doing some falcon surveys in northern Canada, and there were a couple of loons that were caught in a fisherman's net, and I felt bad for them, so I was very careful to stay away from their bills. I mean, they were trying to stab me with it, but I was just, once you get them around the neck, you can keep the bill away, and I was able to untangle and go. And they weighed maybe somewhere in the neighborhood around you know 6, 7, 8 pounds and so on. But a bald eagle adult might go as heavy as around a dozen pounds or so, and I imagine one could get up there, but I don't think they weigh quite as much as an eagle.
Well, and one thing that someone's just saying here, let me just see, that was, so let's just say beautiful feather patterns. Exactly, that's iridescence. That, of course, an eagle doesn't have, is very beautiful iridescent patterns,
Yeah,
right?
one of the adaptations of feathers
Mhm.
and loons is that these birds need to be somewhat waterproof. It wouldn't do any good at all to be getting totally waterlogged, and so their feathers overlap one another just like shingles do. A lot of birds are like that, but these guys actually sort of lock together to make almost a seamless surface. And they also have a thing called a
Okay.
uropygial or oil gland.
Uh-huh.
And what they do is that's usually around their anal area, and they reach back and get the oil on their bills, and then they stroke it through their feathers to keep them the oily cover keeps the bird's feathers waterproof.
And as you can see, that is a live camera. Actually, just you can spool 12 hours back. So I'm just spooling backwards and forwards. That's a live loon cam, called the LPC Loon cam. So it's from the East Coast. It's very interesting. So obviously, you can see the bill is open at the moment. What would the reason be for that?
Well, that right now is probably very warm, and it's going through. It's called gular fluttering, just panting to cool itself off. But one of the things you can look at in that picture there is you can look at the neck of that bird. And you can see how strong it is, and that's telling me that with a neck that's like that, and coupled with that very, very strong, long pointed bill, makes that whole head area a very dangerous weapon for a loon.
Excellent. Yeah, we got some more questions. Lucia Bell is asking, do the ospreys attack the loon offsprings too?
They do, because they're competitors. I mean, imagine more they harass them. Ospreys eat fish almost solely, but they have been known to catch the odd duckling or small duck, and even a muskrat. As I said, most wildlife are opportunistic feeders, so the osprey are the same. But in the case of an osprey coming down and harassing a loon, it's more along the lines they're both competitors for the fish in the body of water where they are, and so the osprey is just trying to drive it off.
Okay, thank you, Professor Bird. Next question is from Jane Strump. Did he eat the eagle? Well, I think as far as we know, no. That's a good question, because if it's carnivorous, why didn't the loon eat the eagle, right?
Well, the loons are. I mean, I told you they do swallow ducklings, and
right.
Ducklings are very small, and they're something they can just gulp down. I mean, loons are capable of swallowing very, very large things. I think their esophagus is quite expandable, much in the same way a heron's esophagus is. But the loon wouldn't be interested in eating a bald eagle because it doesn't have the right beak to pluck the feathers and eat the meat. It's just not something it would be interested in doing. This bird was strictly defending its young and itself from this bald eagle. And they're commonly preyed upon, the ducklings, by gulls. Gulls are amazing predators, almost like birds of prey. For example, blackback gulls, which are one of the largest gulls that we have in North America, are quite capable of swallowing eider ducklings whole. In fact, they're a major predatory force on eider duck colonies on the eastern islands in the Atlantic Ocean. And so, a herring gull or a blackback gull can be just as predatory as a bald eagle.
Very good. I'm just going to jump. Melody, hello. She says, hi, Christian, everyone. Love the sounds of loon. So I'm just going to blend my mic out for a second, and I'm going to play you some loon sounds, which I actually downloaded. So 1 second. I mean, that's a very eerie sound. It sounds almost like a wolf, doesn't
Yeah,
it?
I'm very familiar with this sound,
Yeah,
Christian,
tell
because
us, David.
yeah, I grew up in Algonquin Park when I was a boy in Ontario. My father and mother would take me and my sisters up to Algonquin Park, up to Lake or Two Rivers every year, and essentially we would hear the loons calling on the lake in the middle of the night. I love the sound of it. They have three main calls. They have a wailing call, they have a tremolo call, and they have a yodel call. And they're all used for different purposes. And
Right.
there are some times when the breeding season's over and the territorial aggressions are no longer occurring. Some of the loons will actually get together in small groups, and they'll sort of duet and sing together, or whatever. And you'll also get members of a breeding pair duetting. The thing about loons is that about this aggression in this beak, as I've told you, that loons will basically drive off and kill ducks and grebes that come into their onto their lakes, because they regard those as they regard those as competitors for their fish. But loons themselves often will kill each other. What happens is you'll get a pair of loons on a lake, and they could have eggs, they might have young or whatever, and a non-mated loon, usually a male, will come into the lake, and he'll start harassing the pair, and his intent is to either drive the male off or kill it. because he wants the female for himself and the territory. And so what happens is that male will come in, and more often than not, this might happen around 20% of the time in a given year too, for a loon population. Male will come in, start harassing the male, and beating it with its wings and trying to drown it, and basically tiring it out. And eventually the male will leave, or they'll have a fight, and one will kill the other. And it could be, it happened to this bald eagle, a blow to the heart or a blow to the head or whatever. And so loons are very, very aggressive birds, even to each other, besides to anything that comes after their young, a predator.
And thank you very much. Tim Phillips has an interesting, he just looked at Wikipedia. Thanks, Tim, for doing that. He says a loon mass weight is from 3.5 to 18 pounds. The length is 2.3 to 3 foot, according to the Wikipedia. So thanks for that.
Okay, all right. So that's a surprise to me. I would not have thought a loon that would get as heavy as 18 pounds, but I knew they'd be up there around maybe 10, 11 pounds. But the ones I had in my hands lifting up certainly weren't that weight. They weren't up to 18 pounds, but they might have been around 10 pounds or so.
And some more remarks. Zara on the East Coast. Hi, Zara. Loons are so beautiful and they sound amazing around the cottage area of Ontario. I think that's also what you were talking about, weren't you?
Well, a comment on that.
Yes.
I don't know if many people are aware, but I'm heading a team across Canada to establish the Canada jay as the national bird for Canada. Now we're not quite there yet. We still have to get the federal government's attention, but their attention is elsewhere right now. There was a contest held about 4 years ago by the Canadian Royal Canadian Geographical Society. They had 40 candidates to choose a national bird. It wasn't to choose the bird out of that contest, but it was just to create discussion among Canadians about what would make a great bird for Canada. And of course, one of the candidates in there was the common loon. And I knew it was going to win the contest because it's featured on our coin. And loons are really an iconic bird among Canadians, especially cottagers, because that's one of the things that people enjoy listening to on their lakes is hearing these loons yodel even in the middle of the night. And so I knew it was going to win the contest. And of course, the second place bird wasn't the gray jay at the time. We called the Canada jay. We got the old name back. Was the snowy owl.
Yes.
And what's interesting about that is the snowy owl is Quebec's bird and the common loon is Ontario's bird. And you can imagine that a lot of the voters in that contest were from Quebec and Ontario, our two most populous provinces. So I'm not surprised those birds came in first and second. But fortunately, the Royal Canadian Geographical Society decided not to choose a bird that was already taken as an official bird, the common loon for Ontario and the snowy owl for Quebec, and they went for something fresh and new, the gray jay, or now called the Canada jay. So you can see, though, how popular the common loon is. And it's also the state bird for Massachusetts and Minnesota. And that's another reason why I fought very hard in my essay to say, look, let's not choose the common loon as the national bird of Canada. It's already taken. We're already honoring it in Ontario and in the two states. Let's pick something fresh and new.
That's wonderful. By the way, Mark Horner, thanks for doing the admin work here on YouTube. It's my friend. He says the loons, Norman the Loons, and he says that's Katharine Hepburn to Henry Fonda on Golden Pond, right?
That is my favorite movie, by the way,
Christian.
There you go. My favorite movie of all time is that movie.
Good. Thanks, Mark, for putting that in. That is great. DJ says, I think the blue jay should be our provincial bird. Isn't Newfoundland's the blue jay? That's what
it's already taken, I'm afraid, by Prince Edward Island.
Oh, there you go. There's our expert.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, I mean that's a topic for another day.
Yes.
Believe me, there are 17 good reasons why that is an amazing bird. But we really got to keep talking about this common loon and its battle with this eagle.
Right. Let me just hang on. It's just stuck. Let me just get this back. That sometimes happens. The poor loon is not moving. There we go. It's back moving now.
I'd like to make a point about bald eagles, that they're coming back
Sure.
with great numbers. You know, they and ospreys do not like each other at all. And bald eagles, being a bigger bird than an osprey, of course they often harass and steal prey from the hardworking ospreys or whatever. But another phenomenon that's going on now that I've heard from biology friends of mine is that the bald eagles are displacing ospreys from
Okay.
small
Okay.
lakes. So the ospreys simply do not want to nest in an area where there's bald eagles around. And don't get me wrong, they are found overlapping in some places, but what's happening is the bald eagles are slowly driving the ospreys out. And this is not good for the ospreys. It means they have to keep on moving around until they can find a place to nest where they're not going to be harassed by bald eagles.
Well, that's a great point. So what you're actually telling us is that the bald eagle's doing extremely well, and then probably the aggression towards loons is also increasing, right?
Yeah, well, they're just becoming more opportunistic now. Don't get me wrong. Bald eagles have got their own problems as well, as you and I both know. And talking with our dear friend David Hancock, who knows more about bald eagles than anybody we know on the East Coast out of Surrey, BC, the Hancock Wildlife Foundation spends almost all its time with the eagle webcams and so on. And David has told us that one of the biggest threats that's coming to the bald eagles is a big food supply crash, because the landfill site in Vancouver, which is a major food source for those eagles, is being shut down. In other words, the food's being bulldozed over every day, so that food source is being lost. And salmon populations are in serious trouble as well on the West Coast. So without those food sources, bald eagle populations could crash. But they are very opportunistic birds, and in this case here, we may see more altercations between bald eagles and loons, just like this.
Yeah, and Lucia Bell is saying or asking, how many eggs will a loon lay and how many survive?
Well, they generally have a clutch size of about 2. There may be exceptions of loons having more than that, but for the most cases, they usually have 1 or 2 chicks. And if they have a predator coming after them with 2 chicks, it's harder for them to defend 2 chicks. But generally speaking, if it's just 1 chick, then they can often defend it. But when I was telling you earlier, though, about those male loons, the ones who are non-mated, who come in and they're looking for a territory and a female of their own, I forgot to tell you this, is when they come in, and if the female's got chicks, the male loon, who drives the male who's already mated, drive that male off or kill it, and then it would also kill the chicks. And the reason it does that is that it's kind of like the same thing that lions do in a pride. When a male lion kills a male to take his place, they'll often kill any small lion cubs because they don't want to be raising somebody else's genes. And it's the same thing with loons.
Yes.
The male loon will come in, drive off or kill the resident male, take over his female, but if she's got chicks, then he will kill the chicks too, so that he can start breeding with her and have their own chicks with his genes in them. Apparently there are cases, though, if they've got eggs, that the male will join in with the female and accept those eggs for some reason, but that doesn't always happen. But they'll definitely kill the chicks.
Well, that's very interesting. Wendy Wilson was just saying, what webcam was the loon versus eagle incident discovered on? Again, Wendy, my understanding is this was not on a webcam. What happened here is they discovered in Maine, the eagle was dead, so they did forensics. I think they did the forensics actually in Wisconsin, if I remember correctly. And they discovered many months later, because there was a dead loon chick next to it, they put 2 together, and they were looking at the size of the whole, through the chest to the heart, and deduced from that it must have been a loon. And the story has only come up now. There's unfortunately no real footage that we have of any incidents. By the way, Professor David Bird was referring to something very interesting. I've also not found any footage of beautiful things, how you can really see how quickly loons can hunt fish. For example, I've seen only one with trouts, but the loon is so quick. So I think this is going to be a big thing for the underwater drones, as you say. That's going to be a huge discovery, isn't it?
Well, the thing about one of the things I was looking up when I heard this, when the story was brought to my attention, was the so-called G-forces behind a loon's bill. I mean, I've told you they've got a very thick neck, which tells me they've got a lot of very seriously thick, well-developed neck muscles in that neck for probably reaching forward to grab fish when they're chasing after them under the water. but I couldn't find any scientific articles on the G-forces that a loon might have as it's stabbing with its bill. There are such studies on things like pileated woodpeckers, which are the largest woodpeckers in North America. They've measured the G-forces in that, so apparently it's incredibly high. And so if you think about a pileated woodpecker pecking on the side of a tree, for example, and you look at the beak that's on this loon, you can imagine that with the neck they've got, I imagine they have a lot of G-forces going into any kind of a stabbing motion with that bill.
Okay, Sherry Matthews, hi Sherry, is asking how many clutches do loons have?
Generally speaking, it's just usually one clutch. They're not that would be double brooded and raise a couple of chicks. I'm sure it takes quite a while. I don't know the exact time of how long the chicks stay with the adults until they're full size, but I suspect it's several weeks anyway. But I doubt they would have enough time to then have a second brood.
And Lucia Bell is saying, do they nest on the ground or in the trees or in the marsh?
That's a good question to ask, because it's actually one of the things that they do that can put them in serious trouble, is they nest usually right on the edge of the water. Their nest sometimes might even be damp from being so close to the water. And there are funds, like organizations like the Loon Preservation Fund, for example, that actually sell or plans or sell floating nests for loons. And that's the best idea, because that means it keeps the loon nice and high and dry. Some of the major threats to loon populations, by the way, have a lot to do with the water levels. If you've got a climate change causing water levels to rise, or you've got a lot of boat activity and there's a lot of wave action, then they can wash over the eggs and or small chicks. Mind you, the chicks are usually in the water once they hatch out, but if the nest and the eggs gets washed over with water, they won't hatch. And so you've got those kind of problems going on. Loons also have other problems thanks to humans, and that is because they commonly nest in lakes where people like to fish. They sometimes get entangled in discarded nylon fishing line that can strangle them and make it difficult for them to feed if it gets around their bills or in their feet. And then also lead weights.
Yes.
A lot of fishermen today still use lead weights when they're fishing, and of course they get into the food chain. And if a loon happens to be swallowing something, I'm not sure. I wouldn't be at all surprised if they don't also go down to the bottom and maybe eat small clams and mussels and that sort of thing as well. But that's something more that cormorants might do, for example, and diving ducks. But I think they're adapted for fish. But bottom line is they can get lead weights in their system and it causes lead poisoning. They die. So they've got all these things going against them. And then, of course, there's also just fish populations. Right. If you get acidic lakes, acidification, or if you get climate change altering the food in the lake, no fish, there's not going to be any loons.
That's excellent. Next question, another one from Lucia saying, how far south are they found?
Well, the common loons range, there's actually several species of loons in North America. There's the yellow-billed loon, Pacific loon, red-billed loon, and also the common loon. And most of the other ones are found on the west coast or up in the Arctic, and the common loons are probably found just up about the tree line all the way down. But it depends on what time of year you're talking about, because they winter. A lot of the loons from Canada's north, for example, fly down to the Atlantic area, and they gather there in large numbers, and that's where they get their food in the wintertime. You won't get them flying down to tropical America. That's not a place where they are adapted to live. They're kind of a cold water species.
Lots of good questions coming in. Next one from Terry Green. Hi, Terry. Does the loon habitat have issues with the black flies? Wow. Probably difficult.
Well, I mean, just watching that loon sitting there in its nest, you can see there's a lot of flies landing on that thing. And I think the feathers are so thick and interlocked to that shingle fashion that probably the only places that black flies could be a problem might be, around its eye, the fleshy parts around its eye, around its beak or whatever. But I would think that black flies would have a hard time digging in. Now, on the other hand, just about all birds have to deal with ectoparasites like mites and feather lice and so on. And loons would be no different, except that they spend a lot of time in the water. So I'm not sure that would be as serious a problem as say other birds that are more terrestrial.
By the way, just a quick comment. Someone's asking where this live stream that I'm showing in the back is coming from. So yes, this is a live stream. So I haven't done a lot of homework on this. I just caught this quickly before we started due to the lack of time. But this is the Loon Preservation Committee. I'll just read it out to you. The first egg was laid May 18th, the second one May 20th. So just Google Loon Preservation Committee and you'll find the rest yourself. So that's the only live camera I could find. So obviously there are 2 eggs at the moment. That's my understanding. Okay. So yeah, great questions.
The Loon Preservation Fund is a very, very worthwhile organization. And they're basically geared to do nothing but try and protect loons, protect habitat, try to educate the public about the fishing problems of discarded fishing line and fishing weights and so on. And they also do an annual survey every year as well, which I imagine would be a lot of fun. I would tend to think they might encourage volunteers to come and help them do those surveys. But so you could Google Loon Preservation Fund and find out what they're doing and how you could help. Even donating money to them would be a good thing.
Thank you for that. So again, I mean, they're duck hunters. I guess loon hunters, there's no such thing, right?
No, loons are totally, well, all birds with the exception just of a few small species like starlings and house sparrows are protected by the Migratory Birds Act, and loons are no different. And certainly loons are not something that at least hunters in the South. I mean, I'm sure that Inuk hunters, for example, and maybe other First Nations do eat loons. I'm not sure how tasty they are. I imagine they'd be quite fishy. But I know that Inuk people eat snowy owls, for example. But people like myself, Cajuns, white people down south, we're not allowed to shoot snowy owls or loons for sure. Ducks, yes, there's a hunting season for them, but not for loons.
Oh, that's very interesting. So just to say, we actually both Professor Bird and I are located on the west coast of Canada. I think you're actually quite near to me. I'm in Surrey, actually close to the U.S. border. Most Canadians live very close to the U.S. border. I think you just happen to be off Vancouver Island because Professor Bird actually lived very close to the famous Sydney nest. That's a Sydney nest on Vancouver Island, and that was the eagle hawk story that we covered 3 years ago, right?
Yeah. No, I love living out on the West Coast. I miss Montreal a lot. I was there for 40 years, but I now spend my winters in Baja. I have a very modest 3-bedroom casa down there, 2 little villages near La Paz, and I enjoy going there. But I had to come back a little early this year because of problems with COVID, and I didn't want to be stuck down there in Mexico. I wanted to be home to deal with this pandemic.
Do we have any idea how I mean, I know that you couldn't find any scientific evidence on on the pressure or the force that such a bill from a loon can actually exert on one. But do you think it could actually pierce through one too if it tried?
It could pierce through what?
Well, I mean, if one put the loon there, would it be dangerous to us actually that it could pierce right through our skin?
Well, yeah, I think that. Well, certainly they could. I mean, if you approach the loon's nest or a loon with young in a boat, what they'll do is they'll go through certain behaviors. There's one there called like a penguin type dance where it sort of stands up and flutters its wings, and that's kind of a warning, like stay away. And if you get too close, I mean, to a young, if you cornered a loon, for example, on the shore, and it had no trouble, or was having trouble trying to get back into the water, then that beak would be a very, very dangerous thing. And I certainly wouldn't want to get hit by one. I don't think there would be a case of a loon killing a human, although there have been a case of swans killing a human by overwhelming them and drowning the person in the water. But loons are capable of doing that. Yeah. So I don't think humans have to worry about loons hurting them, but you could get seriously hurt if you got pecked by a loon, I would think. And I mean, it's like that bald eagle when it got nailed in the hard area. That's where they found the the hole that fit the shape of the loon's bill, and there were no lead fragments, so they knew right away, hey, a bald eagle found beside a dead loon chick. The hole in the heart area that sort of matches a loon's bill makes the conclusion pretty clear, is that the loon got a blow in there and managed to catch the eagle's in its pectoral area, right where the heart is,
Right.
And sliced right through the pectoral muscles and into the heart, and probably killed that eagle right away. If your heart gets punctured on any organism, pretty much you're done.
This saying what Sarah's asking, what Riley swans, what type of swans were you talking about there? Yes.
I'm not sure whether they were trumpeter swans or mute swans, but It was a case of a kayaker, and ironically, this kayaker was a caretaker for the lake, and he was looking out for the various kinds of birds that are nesting on the lake or whatever, and a pair of swans. And swans are very aggressive birds. They actually frightened my wife almost to death on a lake over in Germany, chasing her to the shore, and she was lucky. She was able to put her inner tube, or I think she was on a sleeping air mattress, and she was able to put that between the birds while she got to shore. But she's been traumatized by them, and she will not go anywhere near swans at all. If we're in a kayak and they start coming towards us, starts to panic like crazy. This poor kayaker, anyway, you get overwhelmed by the two swans, and they not only have beaks, but they have these tremendously powerful wings. That's something that, even though loons have powerful wings, they might use them to fight each other, but they're not going to likely use them to fight a bald eagle, except to try and keep the bald eagle from killing it with its feet or its beak.
Well, thank you. We're getting lots of positive comments, by the way. This is a very educational, informative discussion, so that is great. So finally, Professor Bird, let's go to your own website here. This is, let's just go to home here. So you have an own website. I'm just going to, yeah. So as you can see, it's called Ask Professor Bird. What do you do there? I'm just going to try and put the link here so that others can see it.
It's very kind of you to show that. I mean, it's basically the story of my professional life. I mean, I call it Ask Professor Bird because I set it up so that people could ask me questions about birds, and I always answer them. At least I'm able to do that right now. If I start getting hundreds of emails in a day, I'm probably going to have to practice some triage and say, look, I can't answer them all. But right now, I'm able to handle all of the emails I do get, and it's led to some interesting contracts. For example, I've had the town of Sydney contact me through my website to do a report on the gull control in the town, and I've also have a new book out, a new edition of the Pocket Birds of Canada, which I'm extremely proud of. I'm the consulting editor with DK Canada, and that book just came out only a couple of weeks ago, and I'm very proud of the book. There's some other books that are related to it: Birds of Canada, Birds of Eastern, and Birds of Western Canada as well. And so, and I also put a lot of blogs on there and links to a visual podcast that I do with Brome Bird Care. I just happen to believe very much in public outreach, and I've always done it all of my life, and I enjoy teaching people about birds, and I've got tips on there. It's a great website because there's a lot of information, and I write columns for Canadian Wildlife Magazine and also Birdwatchers Digest magazine every 2 months, and so I take old columns because they belong to me, and I put them on the website for people to enjoy.
That's absolutely wonderful. I can see here tips for bird lovers, 10 tips for installing a hummingbird feeder. Well, I'm an absolute lover of hummingbirds. As you probably know, I take slow motion videos of them. So that's very nice to see. Okay, well, thank you very much, Professor Bird. That's been absolutely wonderful to have you. So I'll just let you finish off and say goodbye. Thanks again for having you here. And then I'll say a big quick goodbye. Okay.
Thank you very much for having me, Christian. And it's been a lot of fun, and these kind of stories where this loon story and bald eagle altercation, all these kind of fun things, and there's all kinds of interesting things out there with wildlife. And I look forward to talking to you with many other times in the future.
Okay, thank you very much, and I'll just blend you out. And so thank you for joining. This was a very spontaneous broadcast, as you can see. So once again, thank you to Professor Bird for jumping in so quickly. Thank you for all your questions A lot of questions from Facebook and also from YouTube. Thanks for Mark Horner jumping in as an admin. If there's ever a volunteer on Facebook to jump in, that would be very nice. Anyway, that is completely voluntary. So just send an email then to sassephoto@gmail.com. I'm just going to blend in my email. Just there you go. So, by the way, if you have any suggestions, and I'm really grateful to a lot of the viewers of SassePhoto that they sent in this story. I got this story from 2 different people this morning, and I was wide awake when I saw it. I thought that's absolutely wonderful. So you're really helping to keep this channel going with interesting stories. So don't hesitate and send any suggestions that you may have for a topic. And I'm quite sure I can get an expert, if not always, but I'll try my best to get an expert. On that note, I wish you a very nice weekend, everybody, and enjoy the sunshine. It's getting warmer. Don't worry too much about the coronavirus. I mean, we have to be respectful to others, but see to it that you also get some fresh air. And have a very good time. Thank you very much for joining, and hopefully see you soon. It depends on whatever questions you may have. Thank you.